Welcome to the Speak with People podcast. My name is Jason Raitz. I'll be your host, and this podcast exists to help you improve your communication skills. Whether you communicate one-on-one, to a team, from a stage, or from behind a screen, we know that when we improve our communication skills as leaders, it exponentially changes everything. It improves our relationships, it improves our leadership skills, and it improves our business skills. So let's get ready to dive into this next episode. Well, have you ever wanted to write a book? I mean, there are enough books on the market. Why should we even consider writing a book if we're a leader? Well, today we're going to talk about that. We're going to dive into why you should consider and you should write a book as a leader. And then we're going to talk about how to actually get the book into people's hands afterwards, because sometimes they just don't magically pop into people's hands. And so I'm so excited for this episode because we have an incredible leader on the podcast today. I first met Karen back in, I want to say November of last year at the Thing Conference. I ran into her again this year in Nashville at the Thing Conference. And every time I hear her speak, I'm taking pages and pages of notes because every time she just has absolutely incredible information. And I know you're going to love listening to this interview. So I'd like to welcome Karen Anderson to the Speak with People podcast. Welcome, Karen.
Hey, thank you, Jason. It's really nice to be here. It's a privilege. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you.
I love it. Well, could you, before we hop into the questions, before we hop into an interview, could you take us into your story a little bit? Let our listeners know who you are, what you do, how you got to this place.
Sure. Well, if you're listening on audio only, I have bright white hair. So that means that I've been around the block a while.
Yes.
So sometimes sharing my story takes longer than the whole interview. But the bottom line is that I started out my illustrious career as a marriage and family therapist. I love to help people, and I love to help people communicate better. And through a whole bunch of circumstances that went on, I needed to kind of change my focus. And I actually went to a marketing training program by a man named Jay Abraham, who is he's a renowned marketer. And I was just like, oh, I love marketing, because if you're doing ethical, good marketing for people, and you're promoting something people need and that will help them, then I realized I was kind of doing the same thing. I was helping people solve problems, and I was helping people meet their needs, and I was helping people communicate better. And those were the things that I love to do. So the short story, taking 30 years, putting it into 30 seconds. The short story is that I ended up being in marketing, copywriting, and editing. And then I sort of slowly drifted into the book world. I started co-authoring books and ghostwriting books. I self-published my own book. I got picked up by a national house. I went to work for a national publisher. And then I ended up ghostwriting books.
Wow.
And I ended up as an associate publisher with Morgan James. And then my other hat is I'm a strategic book coach. So I help people figure out what they want to write, how they write it, and how to write a compelling, engaging, successful book.
Wow. Well, that's good, because I can't wait to dive into that. And I also wanted to bring up, you and your husband are kind of famous when it comes to Savannah banana lore. I mean, you guys have...
that up. That was well, my sweet husband and I, we met when and I'll weigh my age here. When we met when I was 17, he was turning 18 on his 18th birthday. So we've been together quite a while. In August, we'll celebrate 49 years of marriage.
Wow.
And so we for some reason got picked on the bananas game for the Kiss Cam, and that was quite a moment. Let's say that.
It was fantastic.
Well, that's so funny, because what I thought you were going to say is I ended up writing a book with my husband. It's called The Bezos Letters, 14 Principles to Grow Your Business Like Amazon. And the fact that we actually wrote a book together and are still married, that actually is probably a bigger deal than the Kiss Cam. So,
what a fantastic book. I read it recently on a flight. I just kind of piled through it, highlights, and, marked it up in pens and Post-it notes. And my goodness. It was powerful. I think you told me while we were at the Thing in Nashville that someone rather famous in the business world, kind of gave it its nod.
For people who know Alex Hermosi, he has a top like 10 or 12 or something book list that he rereads every year. And really famous people like Robert Cialdini, who wrote Influence, and I think Good to Great might be on there, like really classic books. And our book was on the list. And so it was really, that was a really high compliment. And part of what, and this is what I also want your listeners to hear as well is, do you mind if I just tell the story how it happened? Because I think it would
Please.
be
I love this.
illustrative. Um, so I'm in the book business. I've been in the book business a long time. My husband, Steve, who wants to murder me most days, but that's another story. Um, he basically he kept saying, "Oh, I should do a book. I should do a book." There are a lot of books out there, like you said, but I really want to do a book. And why did he want to do a book? A book gives you credibility. It gives you authority. It gives you there's still a certain panache that comes with having been an author and being recognized as an author, but he didn't know what he wanted to do. He was in the insurance industry doing tech, like
Hmm.
not as an agent. He worked with independent agents, and he was in the tech world. And he ended up coming up with this idea, and it was about risk. And insurance people are all about mitigating risk. Like, what do you need to do to take the least amount of risk as possible? And Steve said he just kind of intuitively felt, well, what if actually the idea is, what if people are not taking enough risk? What if
Wow.
business owners are not taking enough risk?
Wow.
Because what happens is, particularly for entrepreneurs, you get into that space where you're being creative and you're taking risks and you're doing something innovative, blah blah blah. And the next thing you know, you got payroll and you've got HR and you've got all these other things, and you want to take less and less and less risk. So he ended up kind of looking at what companies were successful at taking risk, and what companies kind of went under because they didn't take enough risk. And so the real story is that he ended up drafting this book, and I let him do it. Like, you do it. I'm staying out of it. I want to stay married. And so he wrote this book on mitigating risk, and I say this with the deepest of love and affection. It was just so boring. It was just horrid. And he knew that. And so he was working on it, and it was fine. And he came home one night and he said, "You know what? I've been studying these companies, and I actually read through the letters that Jeff Bezos wrote about how, the shareholder letters he wrote for, like, I don't know, 10 years or something, 20 years." And he said, basically kind of talks about how he grew Amazon. And so I was really looking at how he looked at risk. And I went, "Oh my gosh, honey, that's your book. That's your book." And so he
Wow.
he took something that somebody else had done, and he put his perspective and twist on it.
Mm.
So when people are thinking about, what kind of value can they bring by writing a book, part of what Steve did is he used his analytical skills to be able to look at what Bezos basically put out there for the general public to read, about how he grew Amazon. And so Steve extrapolated the principles. Steve put his spin on it. And so for authors that are thinking about, or people thinking about becoming authors and writing a book, it doesn't have to always be your quote unquote original content per se. It
Yes.
can be your interpretation of something that's going to help somebody. And so in Steve's case, it was, how to grow your business like Amazon. So fortunately, I got real excited about that. And then, I did what any good wife would do. I was like, okay, just give it to me and let me do this. And so his ideas, I ended up writing it, and it ended up being a really good collaboration. And so part of what I also want people to hear is there's such an advantage, these days, for people to understand principles. What are principles of why things work the way they do, and how people can adapt them to their own situation and their own, what they're doing. So hopefully, like you said, you got something out of it as a podcaster. You don't necessarily want to be in the the book fulfillment business, or the everything else fulfillment business, which is what Amazon is.
Right.
Um, but how he did that with his business Steve interpreted that that's what we offered, and that's what people have resonated with because it's helped them to have something they can use in their business.
Wow.
So anyway, all
Wow.
that's to say, I mean, I've been in the book business for 30 years, and part of what I want people to take away in terms of looking at doing a book and deciding whether they want to do a book is really that idea of, do I have something of value that I can offer to my audience? And is it something that, and in terms of the creation part, the late Dan Miller, he was a dear friend. He wrote a book called 48 Days to the Work You Love, and it was very successful. And one of the things he said is that if I got asked a question 3 times from 3 different people, I created a product around it. And
Ooh.
so one of the things that I think is helpful for people to, like, if you find that you're talking to clients or customers or prospective people that you're having a relationship with, and you keep getting answering the same things over and over and over again, you might think about, how could I take that information that they're asking me and put it in something that instead of one to one, it's one to many, and that's
Yes.
what a book is.
Wow. Wow. That's fantastic. So let's debunk the myth because I hear it quite frequently, not only from the own voices in my head, but I've heard it from many other of my friends that the market's too flooded. There's too many books already out there. There's no reason why, even if I have a great idea to add value, like you just said, it doesn't matter. Talk to us and talk us out of that myth because I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Well, that's kind of like saying there are too many different flavors of ice cream. Like, so why, why
Yes.
try to do flavor of ice cream? There's a market for vanilla, and there's a market for um the thing that popped into my head. I live in Tennessee. It's like bourbon. I don't know if we're bourbon or whiskey. I don't remember what it is. But like there are all sorts of
Yep.
different people, like all different flavors. And what I tell people is that, um, well, and particularly in the book world, first, you can't copyright a book title, and so you can do actually a very similar book, but when you put your spin on it, that becomes unique to you. And are there going to be people that are interested in your perspective and when unique to you? I think the answer is often yes.
Mm,
And so I encourage people to look at what would it take to put their own spin on something and know if there's a niche market. Because I've been doing acquisitions in books forever. And what I'm looking for, is really, is there a niche market? So that's really, really, really a small market, or is there a super broad market?
mm,
Because what happens is that in a niche market, you get rabid fans. So, like, if somebody says to me, "Oh, I've got a platform and I've got 100,000 people on my platform," you know what? That, if it's social media, that may not mean that all those people will buy books. But if you say, "Oh, I've got an email list, and these are people that I'm communicating with weekly, and I've got 500 people on that list, and they know me well," are those 500 people going to buy books? Well, they might be more likely. So the idea is that, if you know your market and you know who you're trying to reach, then sometimes a book is a way, and we can talk about finances in a minute, but is a way that people are taking, round numbers, a $20 risk on getting to know you, what you're thinking, and what you're doing. Somebody may not be willing to, out the gate, to pay you $10,000 to be a keynote speaker, but they'll pay $20 to buy your book.
right.
And so that $20 lead that you just have might lead to a $10,000 keynote speaking.
Yeah.
So you're really trying to look at it, and that's what I suggest to authors. And I call everybody an author. The author, when they're thinking about it, is the biggest question to ask is, what's your end game?
Yeah.
What are you trying to achieve? There are message driven books, and I love message driven books. That's great. But I also want, and particularly these days, I want a book to lead to something. And
Ooh.
so that's why I call it a lead gen. You want it to lead to something. I love for a book to lead to a relationship with a reader.
Mm,
And so that they feel like they know you, they're communicating with you, you're communicating with them, and you have that ability to connect with someone. And books and podcasts are very similar in the sense that you're you're having an 35 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, however long it takes to read a book. You have that time to communicate with a person personally. Most of us can only communicate with X number of people, a small number of people,
Yep.
and get that kind of intensity. Whereas a book or a podcast, you again, it's the one to many, and you can have impact. Those and you kind of stair step it. So
Yep.
those some people are going to be like, great, love the book, that was great, that was enough for me. And then there may be a group of people that say, oh, you know what, I want more.
Yep.
Like, what else do you have?
Yep.
Do you have consulting? Do you have coaching? Do you have speaking? Do you have courses? Like, what else do you have?
Yep.
And so I encourage people when they're thinking about writing a book is to think about what their end game is. What do they want it to lead to? So at the end of every book, I want authors to answer two questions. And the first question is, what do you want? What do you want the reader to feel? And the second question is, what do you want the reader to do?
Mm.
And so at the end of the book, you need to know how you want them to feel. Do you want them to feel excited, hopeful, engaged? Like, what do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel positive about something? Do you want them to feel informed? Like, what do you want them to feel? And the other thing then is what do you want them to do? So if they get to the end of the book and it just says the end, then it is the end. That,
Right.
yeah. And I'm in the nonfiction world, and I'm typically in the business, personal development world. I want people to do something. I want them to take action. So at the end of the book, what I want them to do, and it could be that I want them to have a relationship with me and they give me their email address. That's what I
Yep.
recommend most because then you can have a relationship with somebody because you have their email address.
Right.
But it could be how do I build that relationship? It could be a free report. It could be a free video. It could be it's something that a typical book that we do is around 200 pages, 40 to 60,000 words. And I tell people to put everything that they can to help that person accomplish whatever it is in that 200 pages. But the reality is, you can't put everything you know in 200 pages.
Right.
But then they need to be able to come over to you, and then you have other things you can offer them for free, for paid, to engage with them and to build that relationship so that you can have a two-way communication with
Oh, I
people.
love that. I love that. Oh my goodness, I have so many questions about what you just said, but let me hit you. Let me hit you with a couple. Um, I love what you're talking about building the relationship with the reader. I remember the first time I read a John Ortberg book, and I thought, oh my goodness, like I could not put this down. Do you find K 2024? Is there a resurgence towards back to people love back to the actual physical books? You know, eh, eh, is it on par with the online, the ebooks, those kind of things? What talk to us, about that for a second.
Yeah. Um, so the good news is people still love print. For those of us in the publishing world, that's good news. People still love print. People also love ebooks. So
Mm.
what we found as publishers is, and this is really good news, is people are consuming books in multiple ways simultaneously.
Wow.
Meaning that if somebody has the print book, they'll often get the ebook. If they have the ebook, they'll often get the print book. So people will buy multiple. Um, they'll buy multiple copies of the book.
Interesting.
Um, the one thing that's a little different are audiobooks.
Mhm.
So ebooks and print books are readers, audiobooks are listeners. So
Right.
those are two markets. And so what happens is you'll find people that are consuming a book in electronically or in print are a little bit different than the people that are just doing the audio. But we do find that if people do the audio, they'll want the print book or they'll want the ebook. So they're a little bit different in terms of first out the gate, but people are consuming books in multiple ways, which is good news. It's because it's about the information. I personally, I'm an ebook reader
Mm.
because I read a lot, and I I love having I love having a Kindle, and I have tons of books on Kindles and on my Kindle, and that's really important to me. I've got 2 daughters, and they are print girls. They
Mm,
love the print books. They love the way they feel. They love the
yep.
tactile part of it. They love it. And what
Yes.
I find is that people will, they'll do both. And it depends. People get a print book, and then they want it. They can also keep it on their phone. So if they finished it, if they've stopped it apart, and they're waiting in line at school to pick up kids, they can pick it up on their phone. So people are reading differently than they
I love
used to.
that.
It's not just a one or the other anymore.
I love that. In your opinion, are there any reasons to not write a book or to not consider, writing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like I said, it depends on what you want to accomplish.
Yeah.
Um, I I often say that you typically make more money off of a book than from a book. And by that I mean, for the number of people that are buying books, if you look at, say, for example, on a traditional model or even a hybrid model, and you're getting royalties off of a book, um, you make a buck or two a book. You have to sell a lot of books to make money from a book.
Right.
Now, I love royalties as much as anybody. I love getting that royalty money. And I have friends that make really good money off of royalties. But honestly, it's a normal bell-shaped curve.
Mm,
So if you that's why I say you need to know what the end in mind is. So, for example, if you have a business and you really want to use the book as a lead gen, then that's a good reason to do a book and invest in a book, because book is an investment, whether it's time, money, or energy. It's an investment,
yeah.
and so you really need to map out, like, how much am I willing to put into this book, and how much do I need to get out of it, and then kind of back into it. So, like I said, if you know that you want to be a speaker, for example, and having a book will make a difference, because it does.
Yep.
Um, it's like, okay, well, how much do I want to invest in that book, time, energy, and money? Because I know that it's going to pay off, because I'm going to get higher speaking fees. I'm
Yep.
going to get better gigs. I'm going to get whatever. And so if you map it all out and then go, you know what, for the investment, I don't know what I'm going to get out of it, and it doesn't make sense, then I'm like, then don't do it. That said, there are other kinds of books. I love them. I call them legacy books. There are people that have lots and lots of wealth of experience, no matter how old they are. And they go, you know what? It's really important for me to pass this information on. And they're willing to invest and do that book because it's a legacy book. That makes sense to me. It could be a business book, it could be a personal book. That makes sense to me. Other people have a message, things that they've discovered, that they've learned, that they really want to get out there. Does it make sense for them to do the book? Yeah, yeah, it might. But it really, it, and I'm thinking fast. This is why it's not coming out right. But the other thing is that when people think about writing a book these days, you don't have to, quote unquote, write the book. There are lots of ways to get a book written, and it's one of the reasons God invented editors. And so
Yes.
if it's not your skill set, don't try to make it your skill set. I find often when working, because I do a lot of book coaching with people, that they're great communicators. They're amazing communicators. And then they sit down to, quote unquote, write. And then they go back to, like, their fifth grade English teacher, is standing over their shoulder, and they start writing very formally, or they fight like it. And
Yep.
it's like, don't do that. Like, write like you're talk. Let's talk about your ideas, not talk about how you write, because there are people that, as a profession, help people write. And so there are lots of ways. There are lots of ways to get a book written if you feel like you need and want to have a book. I mean, my husband's I love him. Believe it or not, I really, really, really love him. And but he's not a good book writer. He writes. He's got, like, bless his heart, he's got like 300,000 followers on LinkedIn. He
Wow.
writes all the time. Yeah, he's been doing that a long time. Um, and he's a good writer. He writes articles and he writes trade magazines. He just couldn't write a book. I mean, a
Yeah.
book is just, it's a horse of a different color. And so, knowing that there are ghostwriters, there are developmental editors, there are line editors, there are all sorts of people that can turn those ideas and craft them into a book. Because my one of the things that I've said for a long time, the good news is that Amazon lowered the bar and anybody can write a book. And the bad news is that Amazon lowered the bar and
Yes.
anyone can write a book. And so there's a lot of
Yes.
what I consider less than stellar books out
Yes.
there.
So,
And so,
yeah, no,
yeah,
I
go
didn't mean to interrupt, but speaking of Amazon, I wanted to ask you, especially since your book, do you, in your personal opinion, I mean, I love what you just said about Amazon, with their introduction to publishing, self-publishing, do you think that was, that's been a great thing overall? Has that slowed down the publishing industry?
it's sort of like, was the car a good thing over the horse and buggy? I
Yeah.
mean, I, I mean, of course, it's been a really, really good thing. And and yet Amazon isn't the only game in town.
Right.
And so there are a lot of other ways that people get books, which is why we're publishers. I mean, that it's because if it were only Amazon, it would be different. But I think Amazon's only like it's our biggest as at Morgan James. It's our biggest client is Amazon, but I still think it's only like 42%, which
Wow.
means it could be 48, but whatever.
Yeah.
They're half of the people are buying books from other places. Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, Chapters, Indigo,
Yep.
Independence, like all of those places are still places where people want to buy books. And so it's not just Amazon,
Yeah.
although Amazon has made it really easy.
Yeah. Do you, so I've been a speaker for a long time, which I appreciated on your website, seeing that you're SCORE certified. That was fun. That changed my life years ago going through Ken
Yeah,
Davis's
I think this is awesome.
material. But, speakers will want to be speakers will ask me, oh, I want to be a speaker. And sometimes they say, hey, I'm a speaker. And then they expect the phone to ring. For authors, is it the same kind of deal? Okay, I wrote a book. Now I know everybody's going to buy it. What do authors need to know about what they're walking into to make sure they get their book in as many hands as possible?
Sure, great question. Well, it's this is not the sexy answer. This the because the sexy answer is that slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah.
And the reality is that if you have a book, it's about consistently promoting the book.
Yeah.
And to me, consistently promoting the book means consistently giving value to people who are potential readers and buyers.
Mm.
And so what happens is that, you know, I've seen where people get all excited about their book, which is great. I mean, obviously I want them to be excited about their book, but they get so impassioned about promoting the book that they forget that they're promoting a message.
Oof.
And it really is about promoting a message. And then if people want more information, they want more inspiration, they want and I say this a lot too. A good book, a successful book, is a balance between information and inspiration.
Oof.
And so what happens is people want to give away all the information, all the things that they know, and they forget to put all the things that they feel. And so all the things that they know ends up reading like a textbook in many cases.
Yep.
Um, and then most people don't really love reading textbooks. Um, if you get all feeling, that typically is often a novel
Right.
because it's all stories. You typically get your inspiration from story.
Yeah.
And so it's really it's engaging both with the information and the story and balancing that. And so I think it's really important going into that people know that part of promoting a book is actually just being genuine and being engaging, telling stories, giving information, but not dumping the truck all up at once and not always focusing on, oh, buy my book, buy my book, buy my book, because
Right.
that's that's annoying
Yeah.
in my humble opinion.
Absolutely. If someone walks down the self-publish, they're doing the Amazon route, how important it is for them to kind of sit down and think through a strategic plan as they're going to try to tell the world about this. And what are some of the absolute musts they've got to put into that marketing plan, that plan to tell the world about their book?
Well, sure. Well, let me start though by saying it's not just if you're self-published. If you're self-published, hybrid published, or traditionally published,
Okay.
it's all the same.
Yeah.
The onus is on the author. The author always has to promote the book.
Mm.
The Now, I would say as a hybrid publisher, we do more than most, which is why I like being with a hybrid publisher. And for me, a hybrid publisher means best of both worlds. So in our model, you keep your intellectual property, but we do production and distribution. In a traditional model, you get production and distribution, but you give up your IP. In a
Wow.
self-publishing money model, you get to, you keep your IP, but you do your production and distribution. Like, so that's kind of how it plays out. But so regardless, it's about connecting with the consumer. Like that's the role of the author.
Yeah.
And I think there are lots of ways to do that. And I know the Pareto law, which is the 80-20 rule.
Yep.
I encourage authors to be out there giving away 80%, of their content, their value, and then focusing on promoting the book 20% of the time, because
Wow.
people
Yeah.
get tired of hearing it. If you're over delivering, if you look at 80%, if you're over delivering your content, and over delivering value, then people will know that you have more, and they'll want more detail, and they'll want more of what you have to offer. The other thing I think is really important is, and if you read the Bezos letters, you'll know that the idea of day one is really an important Amazon concept. And I think that that's really true for authors. Every day has to be day one. You're relaunching your book every day. So your pub date, which is when it becomes available to the public. Your pub date's a great day. Celebrate it. Have a party. Get balloons. Have a cake. Pop champagne. Like you've accomplished that. But you need to remember that's day one.
Yep.
And so at that point in time, that's when it's like, oh, it's all about continuing to inform readers, let people know, promote that book. That's your day one. And so even with Steve, our book, the Business Letters, came out in September of 19, which was like not the best timing, because we had all these things that we thought were going to happen. And then COVID hit, and it was a
Yeah.
little, it was a little disappointing.
Mm.
But that said, we're 5 years later, and we're still getting reviews. We're still getting, best of lists. We're still getting, so Steve's still out there doing podcast, and he's still talking about the book. And I think that's one of the things for people that have had a book out for a while. One of the things that's typical with many marketers too is you get tired of your own message. It's like, oh, I'm so sick of
Yes.
talking about that. Like I'm doing this over and over and over and over again. And I remember when I first was doing Jay Abraham's marketing training, he had a concept called the moving parade. And basically, there's a parade that's moving by. You're standing still, but the parade's moving by you. And when you look at your audience is changing. Your audience is moving.
Mm.
That audience is never the same. So there are always new people. So your message maybe I don't like the word boring, but message may be boring to you, but to someone who's never heard it before, it's
Exactly.
brand new. They're
Yes.
excited about it, and they want you to be excited about it. So if you can kind of continue to look at what are the ways that you can be excited about your own message, it's going to make a difference in terms of book sales, because for new people, they're going to be really, really excited.
Yeah. What if an potential author has absolutely no social media influence? They've kind of taken the back seat on all of that, and then they get to the place where they're like, okay, how do I tell the world when, all I really have now is my phone to call people? Do you recommend to authors, hey, do what you can to, put into your social media presence what you can? What's the balance there?
Well, um, that's it's not a complicated question,
Mm.
a complex question, because you have to know your target market.
Right.
Who's your target market? I just talked to a friend of mine recently, and she was doing a big push for cold traffic, but her target market were corporate executives. I was like, wait, 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 wait. Something is not it isn't working here. And it was sort of like she couldn't see the forest for the trees. And so when we stepped back, it's sort of like, no, 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 it's important for maybe her to give her book out to a group of corporate CEOs. Maybe it's good for her to do other things, but cold traffic to get the kind of client she wants.
Yes.
Then you're using social media, I think, for validity, for exposure. Like if somebody, like so, I said, if your target market's a corporate CEO, is he or she gonna like, are they following you on social media because they want to buy your your $20 book, or are they following you on social media to check you out to make
Mm,
sure that since somebody gave them them a copy of your book,
right.
that you have a presence, and they go, oh yeah, now I can see her, yeah, I'm willing to hire her. I don't know if that makes sense, but the idea is you got to know who your target market is. So if you haven't done anything social media, maybe that's not your market, and you're just
Ah,
doing a social media validation. um
absolutely.
it, it it isn't everybody's market. And so I think you really need to know who your market is. And then the other thing is uh, if, again, it depends on who your market is. We're fortunate in that, with, like, for example, the Bezos letters, it's really good for any business or small business or nonprofit. It's got a broad audience.
Yeah.
And so I'm always keeping books with me. I mean, the best thing that people can do is give their book to somebody.
Yeah.
We keep them in the car. I give books to my hairdresser. I give books to my physical therapist. I give books to, and then if it's not right for them, they pass it on to somebody else.
Yep.
So it doesn't all have to be social media. Like, oh, what am I doing on social media? It can be, oh, are you talking about your book? Does it come up in conversation? And if you do, and you start talking about it, and you've got books in your handbag and your backpack and your trunk of your car,
Yep.
you can give people books. And
Yep.
so, if your book is really, really, really nichey and that doesn't work, my guess is you're still in audiences where you're with people that are going to want that message.
Yep.
And so David Hancock, who founded Morgan James, he always says readers beget readers. So if
Mm,
you give your book away and somebody loves it, what are they going to do? Hopefully, they're going to recommend that book, and that person's going to go buy the book.
yep.
And so, if somebody loves it, then that's how you can leverage that.
Right. I love that. Okay, so as we kind of round the corner here, let's go to the person. And I'm not pointing fingers, but I've been writing my book, Speak with People, Not at Them, for a few years, and I've somewhat, I don't know how it happened. I've kind of developed this little group of other leaders who have, we need that kick to get it done. For whatever reason, we listen to the voices. We, tell ourselves, I just need more time to research this. Whatever it is. I've heard some of your signature keynote talks a few times and have been so motivated, working in it. But if you could speak to that leader who goes, okay, I've got to finish. I've got to get this into the world. What advice would you give them? What challenge would you give them?
Um, I would just say, I sorry, I don't mean, I'm thinking really fast. It's just
Yeah,
coming
you're
out.
great.
I was just gonna say, I think it's sometimes people feel like it's too late.
Mm,
Like, oh, I should have done this a long time ago.
yep.
I've got other things that are more important. And I don't typically think it's too late. If you have a message that you need to get out,
Yeah.
um, then it's never too late. Um, and I would say also, people will say it's too much.
Ah,
Doing a book is too much, and I don't have the time or the energy.
yeah.
And I guess I would say to that, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to start.
Yeah.
Um, and and the good news today is that you don't have to start with a blank screen. You can start with notes on your. I'm an iPhone person. You can start with notes on your phone and go, oh, you know what? If I were going to write a book, I'm gonna have this little file on my notes on my phone and go, what would be a good idea? I'd love to write about this. And you make some notes and then you keep adding to the notes. And one of my favorite sayings is, how do you eat an elephant? And it's one bite at a time.
Yep.
Like you don't have to sit down and write, a 40 or 60,000 word book. What you can do is just start collecting ideas.
Oof.
And if you have ideas that you want to collect, I'm a big Scrivener fan. Scrivener's, and I can give links for the show notes, but Scrivener is one of my favorite tools. It's a writing tool with if you're writing in a Google Doc, or you're writing in Word, it feels very linear. Like you have to start with chapter 1 and end
Yeah.
up with chapter 12. It feels very linear, and my brain doesn't work that way. I've probably written 7 or 8 books in Scrivener, maybe more. And part of what Scrivener is, what I tell people, it's sort of like if in iPhotos, like say you had an album that you want to. I've got grandkids, so I want to do grandkids' birthdays. So I take a picture for Connor's birthday and a picture from Madeline's birthday and a picture from Declan's birthday, and I take all these single pictures and I throw them into an album, and I've got an album of kids' birthdays. With Scrivener, you can do that with text. So you can have an idea,
Oh,
you can
wow.
have a chapter, you can have whatever,
Yeah.
and you put them all into different folders, and then you click and drag. So if you go, oh, I thought this was going to be chapter 1, and it's actually chapter 11,
Yep.
you just click and drag it. You don't have to cut and paste it. You just click and drag it.
Wow.
What happens is you end up having something that's very fluid.
Yep.
And so you can move things around, which is why I love it. And so instead of having to go, oh, how am I going to open this book, or what I'm going to do, how I'm going to end it, or whatever, you can write text that you think, oh, this is a great opening. And then you get in the middle of it and you go, actually, this is a better closing. And you just click and drag it.
Yep.
And so what happens is it gives you a tool to start putting your ideas into. You can pull in websites, you can pull in pictures, you can pull in whatever you want to pull into. But all of a sudden you've got a place, because a lot of times authors they keep stuff in Word, they keep stuff in Google Docs, they keep stuff in Evernote, they have it in Dropbox, they've got junk all over the
Right.
place. And then, but this is the idea that I've been thinking about this book. And you create this one place and you put everything in there. And then all of a sudden you get to a tipping point, where you go, oh, I've got enough stuff that I really want to to kind of work more on this, and I can begin to see it. I mean, that's kind of what I do as a coach. I help people, get their stuff, pull it together, put it in one place, and begin to see and build. So instead of going, oh, I don't know that I have the energy to write a book, all of a sudden you go, well, maybe I just have the energy to accumulate all the stuff that I've got and stick it in one place, and then see if I want to do something with it. So
Wow.
it's kind of like,
Yeah.
how do you eat?
I love that. Boy, my goodness. I have taken a page and a half of notes. I know this is going to be so incredibly helpful to our listeners, and I want to kind of turn the corner. We're building an online communication skills library, and so we ask every guest some of their favorites, and so we're filling the library with it, so our listeners can access it and get new ideas. And so, do you have a favorite speaker? Someone that just, boy, every time they communicate, you just can't wait to share that talk with somebody else.
Yeah, well, actually, the person that just slipped into first place for me was Harris the Third.
Oh, yeah.
You heard Harris the Third when he was at the thing. He is a magician and illusionist and speaker and whatever, and was so incredibly compelling.
Yes.
And he talked about I think his book is called The Power of Awe or something like that. I'd have to figure out what the name of the book is. I'd have to look it up. But he talked about the role of wonder and
Yes.
how, what we need to do to get back to having wonder and mystery in our lives. And everything is so factual and so whatever. And I just felt him incredibly engaging,
Yeah.
and he was brilliant. I thought he did a
Yeah.
great job.
He was great. Is there a podcast that either guilty pleasure or leadership development that you keep turning to if you're a podcast person?
Well, I'll own. Thank you for saying that. I will own I'm not a podcast person.
Yes. Yes.
And part of it is just I spend all my time reading,
Yep.
and and I don't do much besides
Yeah. I love
work.
it. No, that's okay.
have like 5 minutes to fold laundry.
Yep.
I'm typically talking to a girlfriend. But
I love
that
it.
said,
That yeah.
um, and that there's a new podcast that I actually really do want to. It's Michael Hyatt and
Oh yeah.
Megan Hyatt Miller are doing a new podcast on the double win. And I was like, oh, if I'm going to be tempted, that's when I would be tempted. I mean, Mike and Megan are dear friends, um, and so I was like, yeah, that is one that I would like to listen to. So I would say that one. And then the other one that I've dabbled in, again, I'm fortunate that I have really dear friends, but Ian Cron has a
Oh,
Enneagram podcast that's really good. And I wrote an Enneagram book for Beth and Jeff McCord. I ghostwrote a book for them. So I'm an Enneagram person, but Ian's book, The Road Back to You, has been just an incredible book.
I love it.
So
A little sidebar, just with some of your Enneagram background. Uh, what, take a guess. I know maybe that's, we don't know
yeah,
each other too well, but we've.
no, but that's a really good point because the way the Enneagram is supposed to work is that it's about self-awareness.
Mm,
And so it's a difference between behavior and motivation.
yeah.
And so what people see on the outside is behavior. What they don't know is what's on the inside, which is motivation.
Yep.
So anybody who's worth their salt in the Enneagram world will not guess
I know.
because 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 of that. Because I can say, oh, he behaves like an X.
Right.
I don't know your heart, and I don't know what
Right.
motivates you.
Right.
Um, and and so for me, for many, many, many years, even some of the great folks that I know, and I know some really phenomenal people in the Enneagram world, everybody kind of thought I was a two because I behaved like a two because I'm a helper. But when it
Interesting.
got down to my motivation,
Yep.
I'm a one, and ones are reformers. We like I's dotted and T's crossed, and we
Yep.
want to do things right. But my motivation was really was around feeling good enough
Yeah.
and wanting to work and perform hard. And so I am a one, but I've got a really strong two wing. So in Enneagram lingo, part of what the work is really finding out what your core motivations
Yep.
are, and
Yep.
so that makes a difference.
So good.
So you
That's so
feel
good.
free to share it with me, but I'm not gonna guess.
I love it. I love it. Well, I am the interesting unicorn. I'm a four, and so have the lots of feeling stuff going on and the
Yeah,
creative and the.
some of my dearest friends are fours.
I love it. And then okay, so lastly, then desert island. You can only take one book or recommend one book to somebody. Is there a book that you just say every leader before they breathe their last breath they have to read this book?
Yeah, and I would broaden that besides just leaders.
Sure, absolutely.
It's a new book. It's called Theo of Golden,
Mm,
Theo of Golden, and it's by Alan Levi, and it's a novel. And let me say this parenthetically too. I live in the nonfiction world, but I always, always, always recommend people read fiction because story is where you engage with people's hearts,
yes.
and
Oh, oh,
no matter what your business book is. And so I love people reading fiction. Theo of Golden is I, I read a lot, and right now it's my favorite book ever. I just read it 4 times consecutively, back to back to back to Um, and
wow.
I do this with books that I love, typically 3 times, not 4 times. Because the first time I read a book, I read it for plot, like what's going on with a
Yep.
book. I wanna know that. The second time I read it for character development. Tell me about the people
Yep.
in the book, and what I can find out about the people. And then the third time I read it is typically for wordsmithing. Like how was it set? How was it written? How stylistic was it written? And was it written well? And I love this book so much. I wrote Alan Levi a fan letter. So there you go. Uh, it's it's a phenomenal book, and I have nothing to do with it. He's self published, and it is just going like like wildfire because it's such a compelling read. So
Wow.
I had Steve read it. Steve liked it. It's it, it's it's one of those unexpected
Yep.
books that really touches your heart. So
Boy, I love it. I love it. Well, Karen, this has been Amazing. Talk about just opening up a vault of wisdom. I so appreciate it. Where's the best place we can send our listeners to find you online? And we'll post that all in the show notes and in our email and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, great. That would be great. My website is cleverly called KieranAnderson.co.
All right.
It's not .com because when I went to get it, the M was $95,000 and I decided I didn't need it that badly.
Okay.
So I was like, I'll drop the M. I'll just stick with the co. So it's KieranAnderson.co. And also there's a tab on my website for free ebooks. So
Okay.
Bezos Letters is there. Jeff and Beth McCord's Becoming Us is there. Mike Kim's book, You Are the Brand, is there. So the number of books that could be helpful for your listeners.
My goodness. Well, can't wait to see you again. Hopefully, be in Orlando in the fall. If not,
planning to.
Perfect. Another time. And again, I can't thank you for this and for just pouring into our listeners. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks so much, Jason.
Well, thank you for joining us on another episode of the Speak with People podcast. We hope that you were encouraged. We hope that you were inspired and challenged to improve your communication skills. I want to thank you again for being a part of the Speak with People podcast community. Make sure you don't miss out on being a part of the Speak with People Facebook community group. Just head to Facebook, type in Speak with People, scroll down and join our community because every single day we're encouraging each other. We're helping each other to improve our communication skills. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next episode.